All right, what's up, everybody? Today's a different topic, a new one to the channel. I'm going to be talking about myself today. This is going to be me entering my bulk, which started basically today, and I finished up my mini cut, ended up at 175, pretty lean, probably at about 15% body fat, nothing shredded or too lean, but that's where I like to end most of my cuts. So I'm entering this new bulk, and I figured I'd give you guys a breakdown and a game plan for this bulk that I have coming up. So the biggest thing for me is going to be using previous bulks and cuts as a point of reference for the current and for the future. And one of the biggest mistakes that a lot of people make when they're training is they try and make a bunch of changes on the fly in too short of timelines. A quote that we've all heard is hindsight is 2020, and I think there's nothing more true when it comes to lifting, because it's easy to look back and make a factual assessment on what worked and what didn't work. And now you have a better idea, and that picture becomes a little bit more clearer of how you should be training at that time and how to make it better than last time. So we talk a lot about how building muscle, making gains is a linear thing, and it's a slow rate of diminishing returns year after year, where you say gain 15 pounds the first year, 10 pounds the next, 7 pounds the next, etc. When it comes to programming and actually learning more about yourself, your current environment, and your overall training history and your training age, one thing that we don't talk about is that, yes, if you stick to the same program and keep everything the same, diminishing returns is going to actually happen if you train consistently and have it just be consistent in general. But when it comes to program refinements, program tweaks, and just learning more, that rate of diminishing returns all of a sudden disappears. And you can have years where maybe on year 5 you gain more muscle than you did in year 2. So it's not as linear and it's not as much of a diminishing return as we think. Of course, in the bigger picture, it's generally going to happen, but it's not a line that's straight down over the years. So let's get into some of my personal takeaways from previous bulks that I've done. The first one that I have is low volume with high intensity doesn't really work for me in most cases. In volume amounts, that's subjective. It depends on the person. For myself, 9 sets is pretty low. I really didn't make many gains off of 9 sets a week for chest, even with a high intensity pushing every set to failure or 0 reps in reserve in 95% of cases on this previous bulk. My lifts progressed. My training felt good. It didn't quite feel like enough, and I knew I had a few more sets that I could handle for each day. But the issue was I didn't grow. And if the training's progressing and it feels good, but I'm not growing, what's the point? So I need to increase my volume a little bit. I was making better gains when I was doing more volume. I think if I combine this with the exercise selection that I'm using now, I can probably find about 12 to 15 sets would be the sweet spot, and that's just a guess. It might be higher, it might be lower. That might be a perfect guess. I'm not sure. That's why you have to experiment to find these things out. Another point here is that historically, my best gains are from high frequency and volume. During that power building phase, one thing I learned is that when I train a muscle with a lot of isolation, with pretty high volume, and with a high frequency, as in 3 times a week, that muscle blows up. It happened to my delts, it happened to my lats, and that's what I learned about myself. I learned that high frequency and high volume are great. So when I switched to a little bit of a higher intensity but a little bit less volume over this last bulk, and my lats and my shoulders didn't grow at all, looking back, that's pretty obvious why that didn't happen. It's because based on how I respond to training, I need a little bit more volume. Still with high intensity, I still have to train close to failure, but I can handle a lot and I can recover from a lot and I can train hard. There's just something about it that it fits for me and it works. So that's what I need to do. The next point, my arms grew on lower volume in my most recent bulk. So I was doing, to be precise, 9 sets a week for biceps, 3 sets Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And for triceps, I was doing 3 to 4 sets Monday, Wednesday, Friday, usually about 11 or 12 sets per week for triceps. And I made great gains. I'm going to try and put up one of my progress pictures here over a 3-month bulk. And I made noticeable arm gains in that time. So to me, that tells me that my arms are probably either underdeveloped, but that's also combined with the fact that I probably hit the nail on the head with the volume that I can get away with and that I need for my arms. I don't know if I could grow off less. I don't know if doing more would be more beneficial, but that's up for me to experiment with. As of now, I'm not going to change anything for my arm training because it went really well. Last point here, 15% body fat is the low end of sustainable for myself, and then 20% is the high end of sustainable for myself. So once I get to about 15%, which is where I'm at about right now, it starts to become a little bit harder to diet. I feel a little bit hungrier. Training's just starting to kind of suck. Like, I don't enjoy training anymore, which I think is, at the end of the day, what's the point if the whole process is just going to suck? This can probably change in the future where maybe my lifestyle allows me to be a little bit leaner, and maybe it's a future preference of mine, but it's not at the moment. And then when I get up to about 20% body fat, which last time for me was around high 180s or 190, that's where I start to have to force feed a little bit more. My appetite really decreases. And then I'm just, at that point, my physique doesn't look as good anyways, just in terms of bodybuilding perspective. So it's something where it probably makes sense to call it quits at that and then do a mini cut back to 15%. Although I do think my body weights are actually going to make a significant jump, because one muscle that I've been neglecting for a while now is my entire lower body. So my legs, glutes, and hamstrings in particular, that's a lot of weight and a lot of lost ground that I have to make up. So I think I'll pretty quickly regain some of that lost muscle. And I think I wouldn't be shocked if I did net quite a few pounds of muscle over the course of this bulk, just from making up lost muscle and prioritizing my bigger muscles rather than just my arms. I can grow my arms from 16 3/4 to 18 inches in a bulk, but that's not going to net that much weight unless every other muscle grows too. So body weight is great, but I think measurements are going to be key when you're actually looking at growth, and same with progress pictures. So those are high priorities for me. Let's dive into some of my areas of focus for this upcoming bulk. The first one is going to be a volume experiment. So this is something that I've done a little bit in the past, but your volume requirements, they change over time. As you probably start to learn how to train harder and you become a more efficient lifter, you might be able to get away with a lower volume for you. That's a very broad range that we talk in the fitness industry. So for you, you might be able to get away with lower volume than you typically can as you become more advanced. But you also might require higher volume if, say, you were training too hard before and you had too much proximity to failure, or you were using too many intensity methods or whatnot. You might have to decrease the intensity and increase the volume to give you the most stimulus possible. So volume experiment. For me, this is going to be adding a little bit of volume to muscle groups that didn't grow last bulk. So most notably, my chest, it didn't grow whatsoever on 9 lifts per week. The lifts were progressing. I was getting stronger. I was adding reps, but I wasn't growing that much. So for me, that's just going to be increasing the volume. Everything else seems to be fine. So for me, volume is the first thing that comes to mind, and I think an increase will help. I did 5 sets of a Smith machine bench today, and it felt great. Like, that 5th set was probably the final one I needed for that session. But I think if I stuck with 3, like I have been for all of my lifts for chest before, I don't think that's quite enough for me to grow. I think I just personally require a little bit more. Another one here is going to be experimenting with different volume amounts and actually incorporating a new method that I'll be using. And I don't know what to call it yet, but it's basically, I would probably call it just the basement method for now. It's essentially, you guys know how I use the rep goal system, where you increase your reps total across a certain amount of sets, and then once the reps surpass your rep goal, you'll trade that in for weight. So you'll jump up in weight. The reps will naturally decrease because it's a higher weight that you're using. This time I'm going to be doing that with sets. So I'll find the minimum effective volume that I need, and depending on how my reps go, I will be adding sets. So as I progress within a mini rep goal system on that first set, I'm going to be adding sets to my training. And then once my sets or my reps hit a certain threshold, I'm going to then decrease the sets, decrease the reps, increase the weight, and then run that cycle again. So it's almost like the rep goal system with sets. You could think of it as like a set goal system. So for me, this is going to help me experiment with a variety of volume amounts and give me an idea of what I need in terms of volume dosages to actually grow. And after this bulk, it's going to be really interesting to look back at. So that's going to be cool. And I will probably make a follow-up video on how that went at the end of this bulk. Good news is you'll get that video. Bad news is it's going to be a very long time from now. Next point here for an area of focus for this bulk, I'm going to eliminate prioritized and maintenance muscle groups. That's right, nothing fun, nothing exciting, nothing is going on maintenance. I'm not going to maintain my legs anymore. I'm not going to prioritize my arms. Everything's equal. I'm going to aim to grow every single muscle group. I'm just going to put on as much muscle as I possibly can. Once I bulk up a few more pounds and I cut back down, then I'll do a reassessment on my strengths and weaknesses and probably run another prioritized / maintenance bulk cycle after this. Next point, last one I've got, I'm going to aim to gain about 1 or 2 pounds a month. 1.5 pounds a month seems to be that sweet spot for me. I'm still early on enough in my lifting where I can have a successful bulk and have like noticeable gains from the start to the finish. But at the same time, I have probably got my biggest gains in my history already. So I don't have a whole ton to gain as rapidly as I did, say, in that first year or two, but I've still got a lot to go. So that's why I'm doing a bulk, and that's why I have a system where I'm going to prioritize every single muscle group on a probably moderate to high volume. So my game plan for now, and I hate to set timelines, but if I had to give you a rough guideline and a rough estimate of how this will end up, I'm at 175 right now, about 15% body fat. I'm going to slowly gain about 1 or 2 pounds per month, training hard so I can maximize that in terms of muscle instead of fat. Obviously, fat comes with the bulk. That's pretty much unavoidable. I'm going to do that until I reach 20% body fat. This will probably take about 6 to 12 months, but I don't know. And if things are going well and I'm building a bunch of muscle and I'm not gaining a whole ton of fat, it might be closer to 12. It might be longer. I don't know because I haven't done it yet. So as much as I can try and like select everything to be perfect, I don't know until I actually try. And then when you do try things like a cut or a bulk, your initial target weight or target timeline, that first guess turns out to be your least accurate because you're as far away from that finish line as you are going to be in that entire process. So the closer you get to it, the better idea you have of what that finish line actually is. So that's why everything's kind of vague, and that's why I have a range like 1 to 2 pounds. Like that's 2 pounds is twice the rate of 1 pound. That's why I have a range. 12 months is twice as long as 6 months. So that's why I have a range. My phone just cut me off for some reason. Luckily, that was the end anyways. So thanks for watching. I will see you guys soon.